Welcome to week 4 of our series, I Made a Mistake. This series from the start sounds pretty negative, like we're just gonna sit around harping on our sins and every bad thing we've done. But really, it's more about the gift God has given us because He knows we're human and we're going to sin. That gift is forgiveness. Last week, Daniel and Filippo talked about failure and how they actually want you to fail because it can make you stronger in the end. Now, our failures aren't always sin, but our sins are always failures. And God has given us the gift of confession to help us come out on the other side of failure stronger and better. For those of you who don't know me too well, let me tell you a little bit about myself, or really my personality. I have a pretty tough exterior. I can be quick and a little sassy and sometimes harsh, but I'm also deeply loyal to the people I care about. I'm pretty picky about who I spend my time with and invest in, but if you're one of those people for me, I will stand by you always. With that loyal personality also comes this protective nature, which means I don't want those I love to be hurt. I don't like to see them upset. I get protective if someone treats them unfairly, and that includes me. I don't ever want to hurt them or treat them unfairly. However, I'm not perfect. I've hurt the people I love the most, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. When that happens, because I care so much, I have a very hard time letting myself off the hook. Anyone else like this? This happened to me just a couple weeks ago. A friend of mine at work made a joking comment about how I'd hurt their feelings with something I said. They were talking about something that had happened previously that I hadn't even realized struck a chord or offended them. That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking over and over about what I said and how to address it with them. A few days later, I finally said something, and all was fine. We talked about it and laughed. It totally wasn't as big of a deal to them as I thought. However, here I am weeks later, still thinking about it, still up at night overanalyzing it. Even when we mess up and reconcile with someone, even when you hurt a friend and apologize, even when you've mended the relationship and moved on, we forget that we also need to forgive ourselves. That's one of the hardest things to do because we can often be our own harshest critics.
This series, we've been talking about spiritual disciplines, the practices we do personally and with others to grow in our faith. One of the greatest spiritual disciplines that God gave us was that of confession. In confession, God absolves you of your sin, He wipes away your mistakes, and He gives you a clean slate. And if God is able to forgive you, then you must be able to forgive yourself. Forgiveness is a conscious and deliberate decision to let go of feelings of resentment or vengeance towards someone who has wronged you. But what about forgiving yourself? How can we consciously and deliberately let go of resentment and anger we feel towards ourselves? This is where confession comes in.
Confession is the acknowledgement of one's sins or wrongdoings. In our church, that means going into a small room with dim lighting and talking with the priest. We believe that God is talking to us through the priest. Now, I get it. Confession can be super intimidating. I mean, it is to me also. But you have to remember God is your friend and He's there for your best interest. I know this may sound silly, but one of my vivid memories of confession is from 4th grade when I confessed about lying to my parents when they'd asked me if I'd eaten all of the sugary cereal. My mom took my brother and I to confession right before Easter. My family isn't that big of a confession family, so I had only been a few times before this. I remember being so nervous on what to say when I had walked into the room, but right after, I felt so much relief and weight left off of me. Even though I only confessed about lying to my parents about eating the sugary cereal, which may not be a huge sin in your mind, it still felt so much better to release it. In order for us to grow in our relationship with God, we have to trust Him and know that He loves us. We all make mistakes, and that's okay, but God has given us the gift of confession so we can feel the mercy of His forgiveness.
Confession can be really scary, and it can kind of seem unappealing. I don't want some priest yelling at me because I cheated on my chemistry test or I hurt my friend's feelings. But confession isn't about dwelling on the mistakes you made. In fact, it's the opposite. Confession is about letting go of your mistakes and being washed clean by God's love and forgiveness. In this day, everyone can be so critical of themselves. We notice every little mistake that we make, and we punish ourselves for the problems. But when it comes to others, it can be easier to forgive them for what they have done. God calls us to forgive others, but He also calls us to forgive ourselves. And from another perspective, some people let themselves off the hook and find it easier to blame their mistakes on others. But that's not what God had in mind when He created the sacrament of confession either. Really, what He wants is for us to own up to what we've done wrong, the sins we've committed against Him and others, and feel His love and receive His forgiveness so we can move forward and grow. As Psalms 32:1 says, "Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered."
As we've said over and over in this series, we are human. We are imperfect people doing our best, but we are bound to trip. We are bound to fall and sin and make mistakes. Every faith tradition offers an answer to the question of what to do when we can't forgive ourselves. But only one person ever offered himself as the answer to that question. Jesus died on the cross for our sins, each and every one of us, big and small. He paid a debt He didn't owe. He hadn't sinned and He was perfect, but He paid for our sins. He wiped our slates clean because He knew we couldn't do it on our own, and He continues to give us that opportunity to do that. Today, we want to give you an opportunity to feel the forgiveness of God wash over you, to participate in the spiritual discipline of confession and reconciliation. We have priests available today in the theater. If you feel compelled, please stop by before, during, or after your small group time. If not, take this week to pray about your need for forgiveness. Reflect on your experience the last time you went to confession. For you, that may have been your first reconciliation. That's okay. Remember how you felt after. Confession can be intimidating, but it is a gift that was given to us from God. It is meant to relieve and free us. If today isn't the day for you, we invite you to attend another time. Confessions are available every Saturday at Nativity from 3 to 5 p.m. We would love for you to join us. Blessed is the one whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered.